The fiancé's family and she herself made fun of my elderly mother in front of everyone. I immediately canceled the wedding and took all the wedding money. Be me, 31 years old, living in San Diego, working as a civil engineer at a respected firm, was engaged to a girl named Kate until recently. Thought she was the one I'd spend my life with. Met her about 5 years ago at a friend's beach party. She had this amazing smile, always ready with a quick joke. We just clicked instantly. Decided to propose last year. Felt like perfect timing. Perfect person. Wasn't just marrying Kate though. Was also kind of marrying her family. Her parents, Robert and Maria, are something else. They're the loud type. Always need to be center of attention. Always have an opinion about everything. First thought it was just their personality. Started seeing how their attitude affected everything over time. Before getting into what happened, need to tell you about my mom. Her name was Eleanor. Best person I've ever known. Passed away 2 years ago. Lost her battle with cancer after fighting for 3 years. Watched her fight that horrible disease. Still found ways to put others first. Most humbling thing I've ever seen. Taught me everything about kindness, about generosity, about standing up for what's right. Mom wasn't just my rock. She was a lifeline for so many people. Had this way of helping people. Never made them feel embarrassed. Never made them feel like they owed her. Just quietly did what needed to be done. That included Kate's family. Robert and Maria owe her so much. You wouldn't know it by how they talk about her now. When I first introduced Kate to my mom, it went pretty well at first. Mom liked Kate. Told me so directly. Kate seemed polite enough. As things got more serious, though, started noticing Kate didn't really get along with my mom. Nothing dramatic at first, just small comments here and there. Kate would call my mom overly involved, or a little too eager to help. Really rubbed me the wrong way. Tried to tell myself it was just nerves, or Kate trying to adjust to being part of a new family. Thing is, my mom did so much for Kate's family. Years ago, their family restaurant was about to shut down. Mom co-signed a loan to help them out. Nobody else would take that risk. But Mom believed in them. She even helped organize their finances, put together a plan to make the business profitable again, and it worked. Restaurant survived. Robert and Maria got to keep their livelihood. But it didn't stop there. Their restaurant's industrial oven broke down one day. They didn't have money to replace it. Mom paid for it outright. Didn't want them to lose business. Never asked for the money back, even though she could have used it for her own medical bills later. That's just who she was. Then there was Kate's older brother, Tom. He was struggling to finish college. Couldn't afford tuition for his last semester. Mom stepped in. Covered the cost so he wouldn't have to drop out. Education is one thing no one can take away from you. That's what she always said. Wasn't just money she gave. It was time and energy too. Spent hours helping Kate's family with everything, from bookkeeping advice to babysitting Tom's kids so he could study. Not once did Robert, Maria, or Tom properly thank her. Sure, they said thanks in passing, but no real acknowledgement of what she'd done. Mom never cared about that though. She wasn't in it for recognition, just wanted to help people. When Mom passed away, I was completely devastated. She was my whole world. Losing her felt like losing part of myself. Kate was there for me during the worst of it, or at least I thought she was. Looking back now, realized a lot of her support was just doing bare minimum. She'd say things like, "You need to move on," or "Your mom wouldn't want you to be stuck in grief." Maybe that was true, but it didn't feel comforting, just felt dismissive. Leading up to the wedding, started noticing more red flags. Kate was weirdly dismissive about my mom, especially during ceremony planning. Wanted to include a small tribute to Mom during the vows. Kate just brushed it off. Isn't that going to make people sad? Weddings are supposed to be happy. Let it slide because didn't want to start a fight. But little things like that kept piling up. Then there were the comments from Robert and Maria. Had this way of talking down to me, like they thought Kate was marrying beneath her. Robert once joked about how Kate was upgrading her life. By marrying someone from a simpler background, Maria would say things like, "Well, we all make sacrifices for love." Like Kate was doing me a favor by marrying me. It stung pretty bad. Kept my mouth shut for Kate's sake. Looking back now, wish I'd spoken up sooner. Maybe could have saved myself some heartache. Kept telling myself things would get better. Once the wedding was over, once the dust settled. Couldn't have been more wrong. Fast forward to about a month before the wedding. That's when everything really started falling apart. Robert and Maria offered to host rehearsal dinner at this fancy Italian restaurant they had connections with. At first thought it was a nice gesture. Maybe they were trying to smooth things over. All the snide comments, all the awkward moments during wedding planning. Told myself maybe this was their way of showing some class. For context about this dinner, they didn't just offer to host it. Made a huge show of how generous they were being. Maria kept bringing it up in conversations. "Oh, we've put so much effort into making this rehearsal dinner perfect. It's going to be the talk of the town." Robert chimed in every chance he got, reminding me and everyone else how the restaurant was one of the best in the area. how lucky we were they could secure it. Whole thing started feeling less like a gift, more like an ego boost for them. Whatever, though, was focused on making the wedding happen, let them take control of the rehearsal dinner. Big mistake. As we got closer to the date, Robert and Maria's true colors really started showing. Every conversation turned into backhanded comments or passive-aggressive remarks. Tried to confirm guest list for the dinner. Maria rolled her eyes. We'll handle it. You don't need to stress over the details. Just show up and enjoy. It was such a small thing, but it really bugged me. This was supposed to be our event. Shouldn't Kate and I have a say in who's coming? Then there was the menu drama. Maria made this huge deal about how they were curating a high-end dining experience. Kept saying things like, we've got the chef to create something really special. Nothing like what you'd normally find back home. That last part was her favorite dig. Back home, loved reminding me I wasn't from their social circle. I'm from a small working-class town. They never let me forget it. Tried to brush it off. Focus on the bigger picture. Kept telling myself, it's just one night. Smile, nod, and get through it. But even Kate was starting to act weird. She'd always sided with her parents. But in the weeks before the dinner, it got so much worse. Anytime I brought up an idea or concern, she'd wave it off. You're overthinking this. My parents know what they're doing. It wasn't just about the dinner anymore. It was how they made me feel like an outsider. In my own relationship, they treated me like I should be grateful. That Kate was willing to marry me. And Kate never stuck up for me. If anything, she encouraged it. By laughing along or dismissing me whenever I tried to bring it up. A week before the dinner, there was this incident that should have been a huge red flag. Kate and I were at her parents' house, finalizing wedding details. Maria was in full control mode, flipping through seating charts, going through flower arrangements, like she was planning a royal wedding, made a suggestion about changing the centerpieces to something simpler, something my mom would have loved. Maria didn't even look up from her binder. Oh, Eleanor had interesting taste, didn't she? But this is Kate's day. Let's keep things modern, shall we? I just froze. Such a subtle jab, but it hit me hard. Kate didn't say a word, just kept scrolling on her phone, like nothing had happened. Wanted to call Maria out right then, but didn't want to start a fight. So I swallowed my pride, stayed quiet. Looking back, hate that I didn't say something. Every little insult and slight was adding up, but I kept brushing it off. Didn't want to rock the boat. Thought I was keeping the peace. Day of the rehearsal dinner finally arrived. Could feel the tension in the air already. Kate and I drove to the restaurant together. Tried to make small talk, lighten the mood. She was quiet though, just scrolling through her phone, barely responding. Asked if she was excited. She just shrugged. It's just a dinner, don't stress. Just a dinner, right? When we got to the restaurant, Robert and Maria were already there, acting like they owned the place. Robert standing by the entrance, shaking hands with guests as they arrived. Maria busy giving instructions to the staff. Whole thing felt more like a corporate event than a family gathering. Restaurant was over the top fancy. White tablecloths, crystal chandeliers, the whole 9 yards. Kind of place that screams, look how important we are. Just made me feel more out of place. As guests started arriving, noticed something weird. Most people were from Kate's side of the family. Maybe 3 or 4 people from my side. My dad, my sister, couple of close friends and relatives. Everyone else was either Kate's relative or one of her parents' business associates. They'd turned the rehearsal dinner into some kind of networking event. Pulled Kate aside. Why aren't more of my family here? She gave me this exasperated look. Your family's small? My parents had to fill the room somehow. It's not a big deal. Not a big deal. That was her answer for everything. Bit my tongue. Went back to mingling. Couldn't shake the feeling. This dinner wasn't about us. It was about Robert and Maria showing off. They'd hijacked what should have been our celebration, turned it into their personal spectacle. After everyone had eaten, real show started. Robert was first up for speeches. Grabbed the mic like he was giving some keynote address at a conference, not talking about his daughter's wedding. Cleared his throat. Welcome, everyone. Tonight is about celebrating the union of 2 families. Our Kate and, of course, said my name like it left bad taste in his mouth. Sat there trying to stay calm, but every word out of his mouth was a thinly veiled insult. Started talking about how proud he was of Kate. She's always been the star of the family, always known what she wanted in life. And now she's marrying someone who'll keep her grounded. Smirked when he said that. Couple of people actually chuckled, just stared at him, wondering if I'd heard him right. Then launched into this story about how Kate was always a high achiever, even as a kid. How it was good thing she had their guidance to stay on the right track. At one point he said, we've always taught Kate to aim high. And while he might not be what we envisioned at first, trailed off. Let the sentence hang. like it was supposed to be funny. Could feel my dad and sister glaring at him from across the table. Next up was Maria, strutted to the mic, like she was accepting an award. Her speech started off okay, talked about how much she loved Kate, how excited she was for the wedding, but then started making these little digs about me. Talked about how Kate was the perfect daughter, who deserved the best in life. It's a good thing she's patient, because she's taught him so much already. Almost choked on my water. What had Kate taught me? How to bite my tongue while her parents insulted me. Then Maria turned to me directly. We're so happy to welcome you into the family. It'll be nice to finally have someone who doesn't mind getting their hands dirty, right? She laughed. Few of her relatives joined in, glanced at Kate, hoping she'd step in, or at least look uncomfortable, but she was smiling along with them. And just when thought it couldn't get worse, Robert got back up to the mic, clinked his glass. One last thing before we wrap this up. I just want to acknowledge someone who's no longer with us, but played a big role in shaping who he is. His mom, Eleanor, for a split second, thought he might actually say something kind. But no. Instead, he said, Eleanor was one of a kind. She had a habit of inserting herself into situations. Didn't she? Always had an opinion about how things should be done. He laughed. Maria chimed in. Oh, she definitely had strong opinions. Remember how she always insisted on helping us, even when we didn't ask? Couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were talking about my mom, like she was some nosy neighbor. Robert wasn't done. But in all seriousness, Eleanor was a generous woman. She helped us out a lot. Sometimes too much, if I'm being honest. He winked, like it was some kind of inside joke. Room got quiet, but Robert just kept going. We'll be sure to keep her spirit alive at the wedding. Let's hope he doesn't inherit her enthusiasm for taking charge. We wouldn't want him meddling too much, right? That was it. Felt my face get hot, fists clenched under the table. Glanced at Kate, waiting for her to say something. Anything to shut them down? But she just laughed. Said, oh, Dad, stop. Like it was all harmless fun. Harmless fun. They were mocking my mom's memory in front of a room full of people. And Kate thought it was funny. Couldn't believe it. The worst part was, Robert and Maria acted like they were being charming. Had this smug look on their faces, like they thought everyone was laughing with them. When I looked around the room, though, could see that wasn't the case. When Robert finally sat down, tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Clinking of forks and glasses started again, as people awkwardly tried to move on. From the train wreck of a speech, Kate leaned over, whispered, "Are you okay?" Her tone was casual, like she was asking if I wanted more water, not if I was seething with rage. Didn't even look at her, just nodded, jaw clenched so tight. Thought my teeth might crack. But then Maria walked over to our table. I hope you weren't offended, she said sweetly. Robert and I just wanted to add a little humor. It's all in good fun. That's when something snapped in me. Couldn't stay quiet any longer. Stood up, chair scraping loudly against the floor. Are you serious right now? Said it low but shaking with anger. So there I was, standing in the middle of the rehearsal dinner, chair still slightly tipped back. Room had gone dead silent. Like someone had muted the TV. All eyes were on me, but didn't care. Heart was pounding. Face was hot. Knew I couldn't just let this slide. Robert and Maria's mocking of my mom was already too much, but that fake apology from Maria, that was the final straw. Are you serious right now? Repeated, looking directly at Maria. She froze for a second, probably not expecting me to actually call her out. Robert looked up from his drink, like I'd just insulted him. Kate whispered, stop, but ignored her. Let me get this straight. Said it louder now. You spent the entire night taking cheap shots at my mom, the woman who helped your family, when no one else would, and now you're acting like it was just a joke? You think that's okay? Robert leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. Relax, he said, smirking. You're overreacting. It was all in good fun. Good fun? Shot back. You called her meddling. You said she was too much. You mocked her generosity? Like it was some kind of flaw. How was that good fun? Tension in the room was unbearable. Could see Kate's cousins looking down at their plates, clearly uncomfortable. My dad was staring at Robert, like he wanted to punch him. My sister had her arms crossed, glaring at Maria, like she was waiting for her turn to jump in. Maria tried to laugh it off. Oh, don't be so sensitive. We were just sharing a few stories. Everyone knows how Eleanor liked to take charge. Couldn't believe what I was hearing. Take charge? My voice rising. She helped you. She saved your business when you were about to lose it. She paid for your oven repairs, your patio remodel, and your son's college tuition. And this is how you repay her? By turning her into some kind of joke. At a rehearsal dinner? Robert sat up straighter, clearly annoyed now. All right, that's enough. Trying to sound authoritative. We didn't mean any harm. But if you're going to throw a tantrum about it, maybe you're not ready for marriage. That comment showed everything. How little respect he had for me, or for my mom. Kate finally spoke up, tugging on my sleeve. Can we just go outside and talk? Please? Pulled my arm away. No, Kate, we can't. Not until your parents understand. How disrespectful they've been. Maria sighed dramatically, like she was the victim. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. You're ruining the evening for everyone. I'm ruining the evening? Voice shaking with anger. No, Maria. You ruined it the second you decided. To trash my mom in front of everyone. Turned to Kate, and you just sat there and let it happen. Kate's face turned red. I didn't know they were going to say all that. She said defensively, but you laughed. Shot back. You laughed at every single insult. You didn't even try to stop them. At this point, whispers in the room started picking up. People leaning over to each other, murmuring about the scene unfolding, could feel the weight of their stares, but didn't care. This wasn't about them. This was about standing up for my mom. Robert stood up, clearly fed up. All right, if you're so offended, maybe you should leave, pointing toward the door. For a moment considered it, thought about just walking out, leaving them to their perfect little dinner, but then looked around the room. At my dad, my sister, my few friends who came to support me. They were all watching, waiting to see what I'd do. Realized I wasn't going to let Robert and Maria get away with it. Not this time. No, said firmly. I'm not leaving. Not until you understand what you've done. Robert opened his mouth to respond. Cut him off? You act like my mom was some overbearing busybody. But without her, you wouldn't even have this restaurant connection. She didn't do any of that for recognition or praise. She did it because she cared. And now you're sitting here, trashing her memory like it's some kind of punchline. That's not just disrespectful. It's disgusting. Room went completely silent again. Even Robert looked taken aback, like he didn't know how to respond. Maria opened her mouth, but no words came out. Kate just sat there, staring at the table, face a mix of embarrassment and anger. Finally, Robert muttered, We didn't mean it like that. It doesn't matter how you meant it. Said back, What matters is how it came across. You don't get to rewrite who my mom was. Just because it suits your narrative. She deserved better than that. And honestly, so do I. With that, stepped back from the table, grabbed my coat. You want me to leave? Fine. But don't expect me to come back. My dad stood up immediately, ready to follow me out. My sister grabbed her purse, shot one last glare at Maria before joining us. A couple of my friends stood up too. Looking unsure but supportive, Kate called after me. Wait! But didn't stop. Walked out of that restaurant, head held high, even though heart was pounding in my chest. Outside, my dad put his hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. Your mom would be proud. Nodded but didn't feel proud. Felt angry and betrayed. Realized something important. If she couldn't stand up for me, or for my mom, maybe she wasn't the person I thought she was. Part of me thought I'd done the right thing by walking out, but other part couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough. If I left things as they were, Kate and her family would just spin the story, make me the bad guy. They'd frame it as me being too sensitive or overreacting. No, couldn't let that happen. This wasn't just about me. It was about my mom, her memory, what I stood for. Took a deep breath, turned to my dad. I need to go back in there. What? My sister blurted out. Why? You don't owe them anything. I know, looking at her, but I'm not leaving this unfinished. Need to make it clear to Kate, to her parents, to everyone, that I'm done for good. My dad hesitated, then nodded. If that's what you need to do, we'll back you up. No, shaking my head. This is something I have to do on my own. My sister looked like she wanted to argue, but she held her tongue, turned and walked back toward the restaurant. Stomach was in knots, but mind was clear. Wasn't walking back in there to cause a scene. Was walking back in there to end things. Once and for all, people were whispering to each other, stealing glances at the door. As I walked back in, Kate was still sitting at the table, face pale, eyes wide when she saw me. What are you doing? She said, standing up, ignored her question, walked straight to the front of the room, where Robert and Maria were still seated, looking far too pleased with themselves. Robert raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting me to come back. Maria gave me that same fake, sweet smile she'd been using all night. Back so soon? Robert said sarcastically. Didn't bother responding to him. Instead, turned to face the entire room. "Excuse me, everyone," said loud enough for all to hear. Murmuring stopped instantly. All eyes were on me again. Heart was pounding, but kept my voice steady. "I have something I need to say." Glanced at Kate, now standing frozen by the table, hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I know this isn't the time or place. Anyone expected for this? But after what's happened tonight, I don't see any reason to wait." Took a deep breath. Continued. "This wedding is off." Room erupted. Gasps, murmurs, scraping of chairs filled the air. As people turned to each other, Kate's jaw dropped. Hands flew to her mouth. "No," she whispered, but held up my hand to stop her. Room went dead silent now. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving. Standing frozen in corners of the room, turned back to the rest of the guests. "This isn't just about tonight," said firmly. "This is about the kind of family I'd be marrying into. A family that doesn't respect me, doesn't respect my mom, and doesn't respect the values I was raised with. I can't and I won't spend the rest of my life being treated like this." Robert finally found his voice. "You're making a big mistake, kid." His tone dripping with condescension. "You're throwing away a good thing. Over nothing." Laughed bitterly. "Nothing? You think disrespecting my mom is nothing? You think treating me like I'm less than is nothing? No, Robert. The mistake would be going through with this wedding and tying myself to a family that doesn't deserve me." Maria looked like she was about to cry, or maybe just embarrassed that their little show had backfired. "Let's not make decisions in the heat of the moment," she said, voice shaky. "We can talk about this tomorrow, when everyone's had a chance to cool down." "No," said firmly. "We're not talking about this tomorrow, or ever. This is done." Turned to Kate one last time. Her face was streaked with tears. She looked like she didn't know whether to scream or beg. Walked back toward the door, my footsteps echoing. In the silent room, as reached for the handle, heard Kate call after me one last time. "Please don't do this." Paused for a moment, hand on the door, then turned back and said, "I already did." Walking out of that restaurant felt like ripping off a Band-Aid. There was a sting, sure, but the overwhelming feeling was relief. It was over. The wedding, the constant disrespect, the feeling of being second best in a family I was supposed to join. All of it was behind me. Next morning, real fallout began. Woke up to about 100 unread messages. Most from Kate, few from Robert and Maria, even couple from random relatives of hers, who I barely knew. The tone ranged from pleading to outright nasty. Kate's texts were full of apologies. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please just talk to me." Robert's were more aggressive. "You embarrassed us in front of everyone. You'll regret this." And Maria, she tried to play the victim. "I can't believe you do this to Kate. She didn't deserve this." Ignored all of them. By mid-afternoon, Kate showed up at my apartment, knew it was coming, had been bracing for it all day, but didn't make it any easier. When opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept. Eyes were red and puffy. Face was blotchy from crying, still wearing the dress from the night before, like she'd gone straight home and cried herself to sleep. "Can we please talk?" she said softly, voice shaking. Crossed my arms, leaned against the doorframe. "What's there to talk about, Kate?" I made myself pretty clear last night. She flinched like I'd slapped her, but didn't back down. "I know you're angry, and you have every right to be," she said, "but we can fix this. We can work through it." Shook my head. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't something we can just work through." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, voice cracking as she said, "I was scared, okay?" I didn't know what to do. "Scared of what?" asked, frustration boiling over. "Scared of upsetting your parents? Scared of making a scene?" She didn't have an answer, just stood there crying, while I stared at her, waiting for something, anything, that would make me believe she actually understood what she'd done. But nothing came. Her eyes widened. She took a step closer. "Please," she whispered. "Don't do this. We can make it work. I'll talk to my parents. I'll make them apologize. Just don't end it like this." Shook my head again. "It's not just about your parents, Kate. It's about you. Last night showed me exactly who you are. And I can't unsee it. I deserve better than this." She stared at me for a moment, her face crumpling, as the reality sank in. One Saturday afternoon, was cleaning out my mom's old keepsake box, something I'd held onto since she passed. Inside were things like her favorite necklace, pair of earrings she wore to church, and a small delicate locket with a picture of my grandmother inside. That locket had been in my family for generations. passed down from mother to daughter. Mom had given it to me before she passed. One day you'll know the right person to give this to, she'd said. I'd kept it tucked safely in the box ever since. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a piece of her, of our family history. But when opened the box that day, it was gone. At first thought I was imagining things. Tore the box apart, carefully searching through every corner. But it wasn't there. Checked the drawers where I kept the box, the shelves, even the floor around it. Nothing. Heart sank as realization hit. Someone had taken it. Only person who'd been in my apartment recently. Besides family and close friends. Was Kate? Stomach churned as pieced it together. She'd come over a few days after the breakup to drop off the engagement ring, asked to use the bathroom before she left. Thought nothing of it at the time. But now it all made sense. Grabbed my phone, texted her. Did you take the locket from my mom's keepsake box? Few minutes later, she replied, What are you talking about? Didn't buy it for a second? You know exactly what I'm talking about. The locket my mom left me. It's gone. You're the only person who's been in my apartment recently. Did you take it? She didn't respond right away, but when she did, her message made my blood boil. I borrowed it because I wanted to keep a piece of her with me. I thought it would help me feel closer to you. Borrowed? She borrowed it without asking, without even telling me. Couldn't believe the audacity. Called her immediately. When she picked up, she sounded defensive, like she was the victim in all this. It's not a big deal, she said. I was going to give it back. Not a big deal? Snapped back. That locket has been in my family for generations. It's not some trinket you can just take. Because you feel like it, how could you even think that was okay? I just wanted to feel connected to you, she said, voice trembling, like she was trying to play the sympathy card. I didn't think you'd notice. Of course I'd notice, shouted. It's my mom's. And the fact that you didn't think to ask me first makes it even worse. She started crying at that point, but wasn't in the mood to comfort her. Where is it? Demanded. It's at my parents' house, she admitted through sobs. I didn't want to lose it, so I left it there for safekeeping. That was the last straw. You took something that didn't belong to you, something that means more to me than you'll ever understand, and you just left it at your parents' house? Are you kidding me? I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry doesn't cut it, said, voice cold. I'm coming to get it now. An hour later, was pulling up to Robert and Maria's house. My anger had only grown during the drive. By the time knocked on the door, was ready to explode. Maria opened it, her fake sweet smile fading. When she saw the look on my face, What are you doing here? She said cautiously. I'm here to get my mom's locket, said bluntly. Kate told me it's here. Maria's face shifted into a mix of confusion and annoyance. Kate took a locket? Why would she? Just get it, interrupted. She narrowed her eyes, but stepped aside to let me in. A few minutes later, Kate came downstairs, holding the locket in her hand. Her eyes were red, face was blotchy, but didn't care. All I saw was the locket, dangling from her fingers, like it was nothing. Here, she said, holding it out to me, snatched it from her hand, inspected it carefully, making sure it was the same one. When satisfied, stuffed it in my pocket, turned to leave. Wait, she said, voice desperate. I didn't mean to upset you. I was just... You stole from me, Kate. Cut her off. From my mom. Like what you'd already done wasn't enough. Her face crumpled, started crying again, but didn't stop. Walked out the door, slammed it behind me. In the days that followed, blocked her number, deleted her messages, cut off every possible way for her to contact me. Was done with her, her family, and all the drama they brought into my life. Calling off the wedding had been hard. But this was the final nail in the coffin. And as tiring as it was, it also felt like closure. I'd stood up for myself, for my mom, and for the values she'd instilled in me. Knew I'd made the right choice, and for the first time in a long time felt at peace.